The thing is, I did not think one night on the couch could end a marriage. 2 glasses, 1 party, 1 best friend asleep upstairs where my husband should have been. Of course, I told myself Matteo had stopped wanting that place long before Damon took it. So I handed my husband the blue blanket and told him not to wake the man beside me. By morning, everyone knew I had not replaced my husband by accident. My name is Sigrid Bellamy. I was 36, and I taught workplace conduct to people who thought rules were only dangerous after someone wrote them down. The thing is, I believed I understood boundaries because I could name them better than anyone else in a training room. 2 chairs, 1 projector. Of course, nothing looked broken when the slides still worked. That afternoon, the room smelled like dry erase markers and burned coffee. I stood beside a screen that said private choices can become public risk, and 12 managers stared at me like I was a woman who knew where every line should be drawn. I liked that version of myself. Controlled. Clear. The person who could turn damage into policy before anyone cried. Matteo waited outside afterward with soup in a paper bag and the flat shoes I always forgot. My husband was 38 and worked facilities management at St. Agnes Hospital, which meant his whole life was leaks, locks, broken doors, and rooms that had to stay safe for other people. Years before, I loved that about him. When my first training contract ran late, he sat in the parking lot with soup balanced on his knees and my blue wool blanket in the back seat because the office heat had failed. We ate from 1 container with plastic spoons while rain hit the windshield. He told me I sounded like someone people would listen to. I believed him then. Now he handed me the soup and asked if I had eaten. Not if I had been brilliant. Not if the room had noticed me. If I had eaten. Of course, that was care. I knew that. I also heard something smaller. Managed. Protected. Handled like a system he could keep running if he checked the right parts. At home, he folded the blue blanket around my legs while we sat on the couch watching a cooking show neither of us liked. His hand stayed near my ankle, not touching, just close. He asked softly what had changed between us. The thing is, he meant that he missed me. I heard that he had started auditing me. My phone lit up on the coffee table. Mina from work had sent a message saying steady husbands turned women into furniture if you let them. I laughed before I meant to. Matteo looked at the phone, then at my face. I told him it was nothing. He smoothed 1 corner of the blanket and did not ask again. The conference dinner was held in a hotel function room with grey carpet and lights that made everyone look tired before dessert. I had been hired to lead a short session on workplace boundaries for hospital vendors, which meant I spent 40 minutes explaining how small choices became large complaints when people ignored context. The thing is, context was my job. 2 handouts. 1 microphone. Of course, I knew how to make a room trust me. Damon Pierce came in late and stood near the back with 1 shoulder against the wall. He had been Matteo's best friend since college, the kind of man who still called my husband by an old nickname I never used. Damon sold medical equipment now. He wore his suit like he had not worried about the cost of it, and when he smiled at me across the room, he did not look careful. That mattered more than it should have. After the session, he came over while 3 vendor managers were still thanking me. He said I made rules sound like temptation. He said it lightly, but he said it in front of people. 1 woman laughed. Another looked at me again, as if Damon had pointed out something she had missed. Matteo would have said the session was clear. He would have asked whether the projector gave me trouble. He would have carried the extra handouts to the car without making anyone watch. Damon made the room watch. Mina was there too, leaning near the registration table with a plastic glass of white wine. She worked with me, and she had a way of making bad judgments sound like female recovery. Her own divorce had arrived with no screaming, no affair, no exciting proof that she had once been wanted enough to ruin someone. She liked my sharp edges because they made her feel less beige. She told me Damon was trouble in a clean shirt. I told her he was Matteo's best friend. She said that made it worse and more interesting. I told her not to be ridiculous, but of course I smiled. Matteo arrived near the end of dinner, late because a water line had burst near the hospital laundry unit. His sleeves were rolled up under his jacket. There was a tired mark between his eyebrows. He came straight to me and apologized for missing my talk. Then he asked if the hotel had fed me or if I wanted something on the way home. Wrong question. Damon was close enough to hear it. He asked if Matteo always handled me like an emergency kit. The words came out as a joke, and people smiled because Damon knew how to keep a blade shiny. Matteo smiled too, but his eyes moved to me first. I could have helped him. I could have said that my husband was the reason I survived half my training weeks. Instead, I said Matteo liked knowing where the exits were. The table laughed. Not hard. Enough. On the drive home, Matteo kept both hands on the wheel. The city lights moved over his face in stripes. He asked about one specific moment, not the whole dinner. He said Damon had touched the back of my chair when I stood up, and I had leaned toward him instead of away. He asked what happened there. The thing is, that was how Matteo came to pain. One named thing. One quiet question. No heat for me to push against. I told him Damon was his friend, and that he was turning a normal dinner into a warning label. He said he was not warning me. He said he was trying to understand why I looked more alive around Damon than I had looked at home in months. That sentence came too close to being useful. So I ruined it. I told him he only noticed me when another man did. I told him maybe jealousy was the first real pulse he had shown in a year. His jaw moved once. He said nothing for 3 blocks. At home, the kitchen smelled like dish soap and the soup he had left warming before he came to get me. The shared tablet lay on the counter because we used it for grocery lists and hospital schedules. Damon's message appeared across the screen before my phone buzzed. He had written that the room had been boring until I started talking. Matteo read it. Not all of it, maybe, but enough. I picked up the tablet too fast. He saw that too. Mina texted a minute later asking if the careful husband survived Damon. I typed that he was already building a case, then deleted case and wrote mood instead. It looked softer. It meant the same thing. Priya saw the first real shift 2 nights later during drinks at our house. She had known us before the marriage, before the mortgage, before Matteo became the man everyone called solid. Damon stopped by to return a charger he said Matteo had left in his car. He stayed for 1 drink, then 2. He stood near the patio door while I told a story from the conference, and he laughed before the others understood the joke. Matteo was in the kitchen cutting limes. Priya looked from Damon to me, then toward Matteo. She asked quietly if I was enjoying making him watch. I told her not to make every spark into a fire. She said sparks still burned fabric if people kept pretending they were decorative. That annoyed me because it sounded like something from one of my own training slides. Mina loved the story when I told her at work. She said some men needed to see another man standing near the door before they remembered the house could empty. Of course, she said it like wisdom. She always did when the advice would cost me more than her. By Friday, Damon's messages had become small and regular. Not romantic enough to accuse, not harmless enough to ignore. A joke about my training voice, a complaint about Matteo's group chat, a photo of a hotel lobby chair with the caption that it looked like me if furniture had authority. I did not delete them. I only turned the tablet face down more often. That was the first active choice that had no clean excuse attached to it. The party started because Matteo said the house had been too quiet. That was his reason. He said we should have people over, make food, open the patio doors, use the dining table for something besides unopened mail. He wanted warmth back inside the walls, though he did not say it like that. The thing is, he still thought a room could be repaired by filling it. 2 ice buckets. 1 playlist. Of course, he checked the light bulbs before anyone arrived. By 7, the house smelled like warm bread, spilled Prosecco, and the lemon cleaner Matteo used on the counters when he was nervous. Mina arrived first with 2 bottles and a green blouse that looked brighter than the room needed. Priya came with salad and stayed near the kitchen. Julian brought his phone on a small grip because he filmed little clips of every gathering and later made them look happier than they were. Ria, Matteo's sister, came last, carrying a dessert box and the face of someone already reading the weather. Damon arrived with a bottle of bourbon and no coat. He hugged Matteo first, then me. His hand stayed at my shoulder for half a second longer than it needed to, and I did not move. Matteo noticed. Of course he did. Quiet men notice everything and then make you do the labor of naming it. The first hour was almost normal. Damon told old college stories. Matteo laughed at some of them because the past still belonged to both of them then. Mina watched me watch Damon. Priya washed a knife that was already clean. Ria asked Matteo if he had eaten, and I hated the way he smiled at her question. Care. Everywhere. Care like furniture. Care like walls. Damon drank faster than usual. At first, it made him louder, then softer. He leaned against the hallway wall while Julian filmed people raising glasses near the kitchen island. Damon said he might need to lie down for 10 minutes before he became useless. Matteo started to say he could use the guest room. I spoke first. I said the guest room still had laundry on the bed. That was not true. Not fully. There were 2 folded towels and a basket of sheets, nothing a person could not move. Damon said any flat surface would save his life. People laughed. I told him our room was quiet. Ria looked at me then. Not at Damon. At me. Matteo placed his glass down on the counter. He said the guest room was fine. He said he would clear it. The thing is, he meant to keep the night decent. I heard him trying to take control of the only interesting thing happening. I told him not to fuss. I told Damon I would show him upstairs because he looked like he might lose a fight with the railing. Mina laughed first. Julian's phone stayed low in his hand, still recording the room as if this was just party texture. Priya stopped drying the knife. Upstairs, Damon walked badly but not dramatically. He kept one hand on the wall. At the bedroom door, he said Matteo might murder him for stealing the royal bed. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes were already heavy. I told him Matteo would survive one night without being the safety officer. Damon lay down on top of the covers, fully clothed, shoes still on until I told him the shoes were disgusting. He kicked them off badly. Within a minute, his breathing slowed. He was not part of the scene anymore. That should have stopped me. Instead, it gave me a stage with no one arguing. I went downstairs. Matteo was standing near the blue couch blanket, folded over the back of the sofa. He asked why Damon was in our room. Quiet. Specific. No audience in his voice, though the audience was there. I said Damon needed sleep. Matteo said he could move him to the guest room. I said no. He looked at me carefully, as if he was trying to understand the rule of a game that had changed after he entered it. People were listening now, not openly. Worse, politely. Mina held her glass near her mouth. Ria stood by the dining table, dessert box still unopened. Julian's phone had dipped, but not enough. Priya looked toward the front door. I picked up the blue wool blanket and handed it to Matteo. I told him he could sleep on the couch tonight because Damon had already taken the place beside me that he had stopped wanting. The room did not make a clean sound. Someone breathed in. A glass touched the counter. Mina gave one sharp laugh, then lost it when she saw Ria's face. Matteo did not take the blanket at first. His hands stayed at his sides. I remember the little fold near his left cuff, the one he never noticed. I remember thinking that if he looked angry, I could call this passion. If he shouted, I could say he had finally shown me the heat he kept locked away. He only took the blanket. That was worse. He asked if I understood what I had just made public. He did not raise his voice. The quiet was the point, and everyone heard it because nobody was moving. I told him he was proving me right. I said even desire sounded like a disciplinary hearing when he touched it. I said he had made me feel like a managed object for so long that another man falling asleep in our bed felt more alive than being protected by him. That was cruel because part of it was true. Ria said my name. Just that. One word with a warning folded into it. I laughed because silence had started to choose Matteo. Then I went upstairs. In the bedroom, Damon was asleep on his side of the bed, which was not his side at all. The bedside lamp was still off. Hallway light cut a pale strip across the carpet. I sat on the far edge of the mattress, above the covers, my dress still neat, my hands folded in my lap like I was waiting for a photograph. I did not touch him. That matters legally, maybe. It mattered less morally than I wanted it to, because I had not brought him there for him. I had brought him there for the picture in my head. Husband downstairs, best friend upstairs, me in the middle, finally powerful enough to make someone lose his place. For a few minutes, I listened to the party thinning below me. Matteo did not come upstairs. The blue blanket stayed downstairs with him, and everyone knew why. Morning made the party look cheap. Empty glasses lined the counter. One napkin stuck to the floor near the kitchen island, where Prosecco had dried into a dull circle. The house smelled like old bread and lemon cleaner, as if Matteo had tried to scrub the night before it finished happening. The thing is, damage always looks less impressive in daylight. 2 cups in the sink. 1 shoe under the hallway table. Of course I told myself people had overreacted because parties made everything theatrical. Damon came down before 8 with his shirt wrinkled and his face closed. He asked where Matteo was. I told him downstairs. He looked toward the living room and then away. He said he should go. No joke. No lazy smile. Agenda C had already started, though I did not call it that. He was leaving before anyone handed him a roll. Matteo was on the couch, awake. The blue blanket was folded into a square beside him, not around him. That detail should not have mattered. It did. He had slept on the couch because I put him there. Still, he had folded the blanket the way he always folded it around me after late training nights. Corners matched, edge smoothed. The old care sitting beside the new insult. For a slow breath, the house opened in front of me differently. The couch was not a punishment he had accepted because he was weak. It was the place where I had moved him so I could stage being wanted. The blanket was not proof that he was cold. It was proof that even after I gave him public shame, his hands still made order instead of noise. He had not been trying to own me. He had been trying to survive being replaced inside his own home. That thought came without drama. No music, no tears, just Matteo's hands pressing one last crease from the wool while Damon stood near the door unable to look at either of us. Then my phone buzzed. Mina had asked if the house was still standing. I opened the message and chose the door I knew. I wrote that quiet men always knew how to look noble after making women feel invisible. I sent it before I could think better of myself. Matteo looked at my phone, then at the blanket. He asked if I had anything to say that was not for Mina first. Soft. Not soft like S1. Tired soft. I told him the night looked worse than I meant it. That was my tactical apology. Not real. Controlled. I said Damon was drunk and needed somewhere to sleep. I said I had been angry. I said Matteo knew I would never actually do anything to hurt him on purpose. He stood. Not fast. He picked up 1 empty glass from the coffee table and carried it to the sink. Then he said it was not one night. He said it was the conference dinner, the messages, the way I turned his care into a joke and then used Damon as proof. He said I did not just hurt him. I asked the room to agree with me while I did it. I told him he had made me feel managed, protected and handled, but not wanted. The sentence was true enough to stand between us. He did not argue. That made the truth heavier, not lighter. Ria came over at 10 with the dessert box she had taken back unopened. She stood in our kitchen without removing her coat. Ria had known me since the engagement party. She had once helped me choose shoes for our wedding because my mother kept sending pictures of white satin nightmares. She was not dramatic. That made her harder to dismiss. She said Matteo looked homeless in his own marriage last night. I told her not to use big words for one ugly joke. She said it was not a joke when I handed him the blanket. The kitchen went quiet. Matteo was upstairs by then. I could hear a drawer open and close too carefully. Ria asked if I knew Damon had barely been awake when I put him in our room. She said she did not think I understood how bad that looked. The thing is, I understood enough to hate her for naming it. I told her Damon was fine and that everybody wanted to make me sound like a predator because I finally refused to be the wife standing beside a man who loved me like a maintenance schedule. Ria's face changed. Storage. That family look Matteo had, the one that meant a sentence had been put somewhere for later. She said Matteo was not my father. He was not my boss. He was not a system I had to escape. He was a man who brought soup, folded blankets, and kept asking for a door before I turned the wall into a stage. I told her she had always wanted him with someone simpler. That was when she picked up the dessert box again. She said nothing. She left it on the counter this time, but she walked out without saying goodbye. Priya texted later that she hoped Matteo was okay. Not me. Matteo. Julian sent a short message asking if we needed the party clips deleted. I replied too fast that there was nothing to delete. He did not answer. I saw the little red mark and stared at it like it had insulted me. That evening, Matteo took the shared tablet from the kitchen counter. It was such a small action that I almost missed it. He turned off the sink, logged out of our shared account, and placed the tablet in a drawer with the instruction manuals. I asked if he was punishing me. He said he was making sure things stayed accurate. That word made the room colder. Accurate. Not angry. Not heartbroken. Accurate. I told myself he was building a case because calm men always needed paperwork for pain. He did not answer. He went to the guest room and closed the door with the kind of care that made a slam feel generous. For the first time in 5 years, the blue blanket stayed folded on the couch all night. 3 days later, the house had become a place where every object waited for someone else to speak first. Matteo's shoes were no longer by the hall bench. His hospital badge was not hanging near the keys. The blue blanket stayed on the sofa, folded so neatly it looked unused, although I knew better. The thing is, quiet becomes louder when it stops asking permission. 2 closed doors, 1 tablet in a drawer. Of course, I told myself he was performing calm because calm was the only weapon he knew how to carry. Matteo came into the living room after dinner. He did not sit beside me. He sat in the chair near the window, the one nobody used because the lamp there flickered. He looked tired in a clean way, like he had washed his face and left the rest of himself somewhere else. He said he could accept that he had failed to make me feel wanted. He said he had heard that part. He said service had become his language because emergencies were easier for him than desire, and maybe he had hidden inside usefulness too long. For once, he gave me the true thing before I had to drag it out. I should have taken care with it. Instead, I sharpened it. I told him he made me feel managed, protected, and handled, but not wanted. I said I had spent years being the woman he kept safe, instead of the woman he was afraid to lose. He did not refute it. His hands stayed open on his knees. The little vein near his wrist moved once. That was all. Then he said that being right about that did not give me the right to use Damon, our bed, and a room full of friends as props. He said Damon had been drunk. He said I knew it. He said I had not touched him, but I had still put a sleeping man inside a story he had not agreed to carry. I hated that because it did not let me hide behind the cleanest version. I told him he was making me sound dangerous because it was easier than admitting I had been lonely. He said loneliness did not excuse staging another person's humiliation. He said he was going to handle things properly now. Properly. No named threat. No raised voice. No dramatic sentence. Just properly, placed in the room like a key on a table. I asked what that was supposed to mean. He said it meant he was done trying to win an argument inside a marriage that I kept turning into a public vote. That was his final offer, though it did not sound like one. He was offering me one last chance to speak like a wife instead of a defendant in my own head. I told him he had always wanted a woman who would thank him for making her smaller. His face did not change. That was when I knew the sentence had not landed where I wanted. He was not absorbing it anymore. He was sorting it. He stood and went to the kitchen. The drawer opened. The tablet came out. He did not show it to me. He only placed it in his work bag. along with a small notebook he used for hospital repairs. The silent decision marker was so ordinary that I almost laughed. I told myself he had always loved records more than feelings. Later, I called Damon. He did not answer. I sent one message saying Matteo was making the whole thing ugly. Damon wrote back 20 minutes later that he remembered very little and wanted to stay out of it. The message had no warmth, no private joke, no dangerous gravity, just a man stepping backward before the floor opened. I called him again. Voicemail. Of course, I told myself he was embarrassed. Men like Damon hated scenes they did not direct. But the space between his words was too clean. He was already leaving the version of us I had built without asking me where the exit was. I messaged Mina 3 times. First, I said Matteo had gone into full procedure mode. Then I said Ria had poisoned everyone. Then I sent a photo of the blue blanket folded on the couch and wrote that this was how he wanted people to see him. Mina answered with one grey thumbs up. That was all. The absence sat there on my phone smaller than it should have been. By the next morning, Matteo was speaking in logistics. He said he would sleep in the guest room until he arranged a longer plan. He said household bills would still be paid from the joint account. He said he had asked Julian not to delete any party clips because people remembered things differently when they were embarrassed. I asked if he was collecting evidence against his wife now. He said he was keeping the night from becoming whatever I needed it to become. I told him that was exactly what I meant. He could make control sound reasonable if he put it in the right shirt. He said nothing. Damon called Matteo that afternoon, not me. I only knew because Matteo stepped onto the back patio and shut the door. Through the glass, I watched his shoulders. He did not pace. He listened. Then he said something short and wrote in the notebook. When he came back inside, I asked if Damon had confessed his great love for me. Petty. Small. I knew it when I said it. Matteo looked at me as if I had handed him something dead. He said Damon being scared was the first honest thing anyone had done since Saturday. That line stayed in the room after he left for work. I tried to get the story back before it hardened without me. I texted Priya that Matteo was making me into a villain because he could not handle being unwanted. Priya did not answer until the next day. She wrote that she had watched me hand him the blanket. Then she stopped. Julian sent no more messages. Ria blocked me on social media. Damon's name disappeared from my message list after I sent one last line asking if he was really going to let Matteo turn this into something it was not. The message stayed unread. That evening, Matteo came home, changed clothes, and folded the blue blanket again, though no one had touched it. It was not for comfort anymore. It was a mark. A quiet square of wool on the couch where he had stopped asking to be chosen. I stood by the stairs and told him he was enjoying this. I said he liked being the wounded husband because people finally saw him as more than useful. He looked at the blanket, then at me. He said I had made the scene, and he was only done living inside it. After that, his silence became more frightening than anything he could have said. The legal courier came to my workplace lobby at 9:16 on Monday morning while I was preparing to teach a session called Private Conduct Public Risk. The lobby smelled like printer heat and the citrus spray the receptionist used on the glass desk. My handouts were stacked in my arms when the courier asked for Sigrid Bellamy by full name. The thing is, a lobby is just another room until it turns toward you. 2 junior trainers near the elevator. 1 receptionist looking up. Of course I signed because refusing would have looked worse. The envelope was stiff. My name was printed cleanly across the front. I bent one corner with my thumb before opening it. Inside was a petition for dissolution of marriage and a motion for temporary exclusive possession of the marital home and preservation of joint accounts. The temporary orders hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks later. I read the first page twice, then placed the envelope on the reception desk because my hands needed to stop holding it. The receptionist did not ask if I was okay. She only moved my handouts away from the edge of the desk so they would not fall. That was the neutral kindness I could not argue with. The proof was not new. That made it worse. The tablet messages where I told Mina I had finally gotten Damon upstairs. Julian's party clip with my hand offering Matteo the blue blanket. The hallway camera timestamp showing Damon entering the bedroom drunk and me going in after. Ria's statement that I made the couch scene public before Matteo could answer. Damon's written statement saying he had been asleep, confused, and never agreed to be part of my performance. I told the receptionist it was a private misunderstanding. She had taken my boundaries course last month. Her face stayed professional. She asked if I wanted the training room cancelled. Damon sent one final message before lunch saying he had given Matteo his statement, blocked my number, and would not be used to rewrite the night. Matteo received temporary exclusive use of the house, and I moved into a short-term rental with white walls and a sofa too small to sleep on. The joint accounts were restricted to household expenses until the hearing, and every card swipe started feeling watched. Ria stopped answering, Priya left the group chat, and Julian sent Matteo the original video file without asking me. Damon told mutual friends he had never been part of my fantasy. My company removed me from 2 conduct trainings and called it a schedule adjustment. The thing is, I thought sending Matteo to the couch would prove I still had power in my own marriage. I thought another man beside me would make my husband finally see me as someone who could be lost. It only showed everyone that I needed witnesses before I could say I felt unwanted. The blue blanket stays folded at the end of the rental sofa. No one asks if I am cold,